There we go. That'll help. I'm recording and I'm like, it doesn't work if I don't unmute myself. So our first exam is this week. It covers everything we've covered in weeks 1 through 5. Anything we talk about today and the reading will be on exam number 2. So it'll be online for you. Some of you may have already done it. It is due no later than this Saturday. Did not mean to give you a Valentine's Day gift, but Valentine's Day is the deadline. So due at midnight this Saturday. Has to be done in one sitting, so you can't like pause it and come back to it. There's about 30 questions. I think I added 1 or 2 extra credit. And it should, well, I don't know how long it'll take you. I allow you about 90 minutes because that's how long we meet in person. If for any reason you have like technical issues or anything, reach out to me. Weeks 1 through 5 and open notes. I know that's the exciting part. So you can use your notes, the PowerPoints, things like that while you take the exam. So this week, what we're getting into is COTAC Chapter 5, all about language and communication. When we talk about linguistics, for anthropologists, we're less interested in grammar. So when we say we study language, we might study the grammatical rules, but we're not usually the people going around correcting your grammar. That's going to be more English teachers. And I mean, rightfully so, that's their job. They should be the ones that are saying that's correct or no. We focus more on social variation, regional differences, educational differences, socioeconomic differences, gender differences, and I'll bring up some of those examples today. Language, defined here, is a communication system based on meaningful signs, sounds, gestures, or marks. Basically, it's the primary form of human communication. So when we say language, I don't just mean written and spoken. I also mean like American Sign Language. I'll get into some examples of like nonverbal cues that are technically part of our language. I have the little image up there of the noise or word ope, which funnily enough, I had moved from Michigan to Washington State and then moved back to Michigan right when we started talking about ope. And I thought, yeah, I know I've said that before, but I don't do it that often. And then all of my colleagues from Washington that were from all over the country and the world started tagging me in those, going, that's that weird noise you make all the time. And I thought, oh my gosh, now I hear it. I do. I say it a lot. And I catch myself like, there it is. Oh, there it is. But it's a regional thing. And it's kind of funny to me to try to explain to somebody not from the Michigan or Great Lakes area that it's I don't really know what it's originally from. I haven't studied its etymology, but I'm sure it's just kind of like similar to oops, because we usually use it like moving past you or bumping into somebody. We'll say, oh, sorry. What's the classic is the, oh, I'm gonna sneak past you and get the ranch. Very Midwestern. And that is legit. Every time I've lived outside of the Midwest, they all think my love of ranch is weird. And I'm like, just leave me with my ranch. Love it. Technically, only humans can actually speak. Now, animals definitely communicate, and a lot of animals are really good mimics of human speech. We know parrots can imitate us, so can crows and ravens. I'm trying to remember the crow's name. I think it's a crow on TikTok and Instagram, but he speaks Spanish. And he has a very deep voice. He's like, hola. And every time it's like not what I'm expecting a bird to sound like. So there are quite a few animals that can mimic our speech, and they might even be able to learn how to actually communicate with our language, but they're using our language. Non-human primates communicate with call systems. basically the various different noises and gestures they use to communicate. So it can be different hoots, hollers, grunts. My favorite little trivia about gorillas. Gorillas are one of the strongest animals out there. They can rip you limb from limb, but they're vegetarian. And when they eat, they make up little songs. And that to me makes me think of like, I have also been hungry enough and gotten good enough food that I've done a little like happy dance. And I'm like, I love that our cousins are doing the same thing, just about like leafy greens. I love a good salad, but I don't think I've ever done a happy dance about a salad. I have no offense, gorillas. I just. Two important bits of information to know about apes. They are different than monkeys. Technically, there are only a handful of great apes out there. That would be chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, orangutans. Gibbons and Samangs count as like lesser apes. Everybody else in the primate world, for the most part, there's slightly differences, but mostly we'd lump everybody else in as monkeys. But we have that core group of apes. There is a difference. And don't keep them as pets. There's actually a horror movie coming out about a chimp going wild because unfortunately it has happened before. I understand, especially chimpanzees, they are one of our closest living relatives. They are very human-like in some instances, and they're very smart, but they are wild animals. And what a lot of people don't understand is, yeah, they're slightly smaller in stature than us, but they are way stronger. So I will let you, if you want, to Google Travis the chimp. He attacked a woman who ended up needing a bunch of plastic surgery because of how much damage he did. In Travis's defense, he is a wild animal. His owner would basically treat him like a human, dress him up, bring him everywhere. And on the night in question, my understanding is she said Travis seemed stressed. So she gave him a glass of wine and a Xanax. No one should mix those two, especially not a chimpanzee. So poor Travis had a really bad reaction, flipped out, attacked people. And when cops were called, because this was just like in Los Angeles, he was taken out. He was killed on site, which breaks my heart because it's not Travis's fault. But I also understand, while LAPD does have a lot of training, I'm sure they're not trained what to do with a rampaging chimp. Like, I get it. When something like that's coming at you, if it's you versus him, I understand why it happened. It's heartbreaking because, like I said, I'm like, it wasn't really Travis's fault. But they are not pets and they are not human. They're very, very close to human, but they're not. So no Xanax and wine for anybody. Please don't mix those. Right? Don't do that. Just in case you were like, oh, that was my weekend plans. Don't do that. Looking at apes versus monkeys, I'm not going to quiz you on the differences. There are some monkeys that do not have tails, but no apes have tails. And if you want to be a nerd at trivia like me, there's only, I believe, 6 species of monkeys with prehensile tails, like this guy on the right, meaning they can pick things up with their tail, swing from their tail. And all 6 species are from South America. So now you can be a nerd. If you see a monkey picking something up with their tail, you can be like, that's a South American monkey. And if your friends are like mine, they'll say, I don't need to know that. No, my friends are used to my random trivia. Now I bring up apes because we have done studies where we have taught apes American Sign Language. The most famous was Coco the gorilla. She passed a few years back. If you want to watch a video about her, there's a short video, I believe, linked on either this slide or the next. It is a very sweet video because it's her meeting Robin Williams, and she loved him, which honestly, I have yet to meet someone that's like, I hate that guy. I'd be like, wow, you hate Joy? I don't, how could you hate Robin Williams? She regularly used around 400 ASL signs, but knew over 700. What's fascinating is we saw cultural transmission. We talked about how culture is learned and shared. Obviously, so is language. And while her handlers were teaching Coco signs, Coco was turning around and trying to teach some neighboring chimps the same signs. So she recognized that she could communicate better with her handlers, and wanted to kind of share that knowledge with her neighbors. The neighboring chimps did learn some ASL from her and the handlers. Their names were Washo and Lucy. That part isn't as important. Coco's pretty important. She taught us a lot. And in the video, you'll notice like she likes to like play with Robin Williams, gets him to tickle her. Like it's very, very cute and gentle, but you can tell there are handlers all off to the side because I'm like, Robin Williams was a national treasure. And if Coco wanted to, she could rip him limb from limb. She seems to not want to, which is good, but I'm like, her handlers were right by, like, just give us the word. We will remove you before if she gets agitated. But she wasn't prone to violence, so I think they kind of knew it was going to be okay. Oops. Looking at ASL in apes, Coco also demonstrated productivity when we create new expressions that are comprehensive to other speakers. For example, she wanted some watermelon and she knew audibly the word watermelon and understood it was water and melon, but didn't have an ASL sign to ask for it specifically. So she combined drink and fruit because she could recognize like it's a juicy kind of drinkable fruit. It's a fruit. Combine those. That's what I want. And her handlers could figure it out. I think of even for us who speak the same language since birth. I've spoken English since I was very young, and yet I will still have moments where I blank on a word. And so if I was looking for a dry erase marker, but I couldn't remember what it was called, and I asked y'all, hey, have you seen my dry erase like a crayon thing? You'd know like what I was getting at. You'd be able to be like, it's a dry erase marker. Then I probably feel goofy, but I'd be like, yes, that's it. I think my favorite was somebody on Tumblr back in the day forgot the word for stingrays and called them sea pancakes. And I've never thought about them the same way since. I've been like, yeah, they are kind of living pancakes in the sea. You're not wrong. I knew what you were talking about. The other thing she demonstrated is displacement, describing things in the past, present, and future. So my favorite, because I'm a procrastinator, she would procrastinate. They would tell her things like, okay, Coco, we're done playing with blocks. It's time to clean up and go do some work. And she would sign the sign for later to try to say like, 5 more minutes. Yeah, I'm not done playing. And I feel like, although I said she's not human, that's very human to want to procrastinate if you're having fun doing something and you don't want to do something hard. Yeah, I'm very guilty of going, later, maybe later. Now, I have 2 short TikToks because there are quite a few animals that are using buttons to communicate. One of the most famous is this, I'm trying to remember what kind of doodle she is, but on the left is a dog named Bunny. This is actually an older video, but I thought it was pretty impressive. Her owner figured out Bunny's pretty smart and wanted to give her a way to communicate. So she started with a few buttons that you can like push and record your voice. And so she started with things like you push the button, the voice says outside, it communicates, the dog has to go potty outside. That's a pretty easy one to train them. She has since added, she has close to like 100 buttons now. Yeah. Yeah, it's phenomenal. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes it weirds me out because there was a video, I couldn't find it. But Bunny the dog asked, because it's kind of like broken English, she pushed the buttons to say like, where went yesterday? And I'm thinking like, I don't know how to explain that to like a human, where yesterday went. I don't know how to begin explaining that to a dog. So hopefully the volume works okay. I will see if I can crank it up. Nope, it's not gonna work. I'm sorry. The volume in here is kind of terrible. So if you want to go on like Google Slides that I have online, you can watch it on your own. But basically what Bunny does is they went for a walk. She came back and she kept hitting the button that said mad. She was mad. And her person was like, okay, what are you mad about? And if I remember correctly, she then pushed the button for stranger when she sees somebody outside. And her owner goes and looks and says, like, there's nobody out there. What are you doing? So then she says, mad stranger, ouch, and shows her paw. And she had a small burr stuck in between her toes. So she was with her buttons able to communicate, hey, this hurts, mom. Get this out of my toes. The argument is there's also a cat who's very sassy. There's a reason why I haven't gotten my cat buttons. He yells at me enough, not speaking English. I don't know that I need him to actually yell at me, like, no. So the argument is, does it count as language? Or are they just really well trained? I'm not going to make you decide. Yes, somebody is calling me. Sorry, I'm letting it go to voicemail. Oh, turn off your phones. Oh my God. It's me. I'm the culprit. I'm not going to make you decide whether or not it counts as language, but the short and fast of it is they are communicating. Whether or not they fully understand like grammar and sentence structure and things like that, I don't know. But they're clearly able to communicate. Looking at when humans developed language, that's pretty difficult. Because it was probably many, many thousands of years that we had spoken language, but not written. And even written language, if it was written on paper or papyrus, it's not going to survive the archaeological record. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint when did we start speaking with language. So instead we turn to genetics, and here humans developed the mutated gene for language, FOXP2, around 150,000 years ago. We say that's at least when we started the ability to speak, because that is the mutated gene that allows for fine tongue and lip movements necessary to speak a language. So realistically, pre 150,000 years ago, we would have looked a lot different, and we probably communicated similarly to like gorillas and chimps now. Probably not the exact same way, but similar with like grunts and noises like that. Realistically, though, a lot of times, like in my other class that's physical anthropology, I complain a lot about the depiction of, quote, cavemen in media, because it makes them seem like ancient humans were really stupid and couldn't communicate at all. And it was maybe 50,000 years ago. And looking at our genetics and our human history, we know that, yeah, we were probably having full conversations. It may not have been as linguistically advanced as nowadays, but we had the ability about 150,000 years ago. I mentioned nonverbal communication. Something I was told a lot as a very expressive child is, Stephanie, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Because I was a big mouthy child that would be told to apologize to my sister. And I would say, I'm sorry, but it was said like, I'm sorry that you feel that way. And my mom would have to be like, that's not a real apology. And you're saying it very sassy. I don't believe you. Like, you have to mean it. There are gendered differences. The example I have up there, this is an older term now, but manspreading. So this is in no way a dig at all men. But in our culture, there is a common trend for men in public spaces to sit with their knees as far apart as humanly possible. Now, some of us, myself included, I'm a big lady, so like my thighs are big. So sometimes I sit like that because it's comfortable for me. So I understand there might be some physical reasons why we sit like that. Also part of it is a like, mom, Because when I was a kid, I was also told constantly to sit like a lady. And I sit like a dude now. And I also love dresses, but have discovered the joy of leggings. So I can sit like a dude. Because who cares? I'm like, I don't have to sit with my knees crossed. I'm not, there's leggings. We're fine. We're good. Manspreading, the reason why I bring that up is it is learned rather than biological. There's nothing in a man's skeletal structure that says he has to sit with his legs as far apart as possible. Likewise, there's nothing in a woman's biology that says she has to sit with her legs crossed or knees together. What it is it's a learned trait to take up space. So what I mean by that is, I'm not saying that little American boys are sat down one day and told, hey, it's your God-given right as a man to take up as much space as possible. No, that's not what's happening. What is happening is little girls are taught the opposite. They're told, sit like a lady, sit with your knees together. That's more proper. That's more ladylike. Now that harkens back to wearing shorter skirts with, yeah, you don't want to sit with your legs apart. People can see up your skirt. Obviously, if that's what you're wearing, then yeah, sit with your legs together. I would argue the same goes for men in kilts. Sit with your knees together. But if we're wearing jeans, it doesn't really matter. So what happens is a lot of little girls are trained from a young age to take up as little space as possible. And then men are not taught really anything about it. And so what happens is we get comfortable. So you get a bunch of different genders on a city bus, and the women are instinctively trying to take up as little space as possible, and the men are just getting comfortable. The problem is, and I've seen it when you have it sometimes does turn into a little bit of a competition where I've seen like two men trying to like fight for space, and I'm like, weird flex, but okay, we're on a city bus, like, calm down. So it's learned, it's not biological. I will say the biology argument I hear a lot is because of testicles, that men have to sit with their legs apart. But I will say there are tons of cultures where men naturally sit with their legs crossed and their testicles are not any stronger or smaller than anybody else's. So it is possible biologically, but it's learned. Kinesics is basically the study of it's not what you say, but how you say it. This might be a little lost for my Zoom participants because I don't have a camera in this class, but I'll use myself as an example. I will be nicer, but let's say exam 1 this week. Let's say you missed the exam, hopefully not. And you come up to me and you say, Stephanie, I missed the exam. Is there any way I can make it up? And I say, blank. Yeah, sure, that's fine. If I say it like that, you might think it's okay. If I say it very gently of like, yeah, sure, that's fine. You're gonna think like, oh, okay, she, actually cares and I can do this. But if you tell me and I say, yeah, sure, that's fine. You're gonna be like, oh, she's pissed. Like she's so mad at me. She doesn't want me to make it up. So it's not what you say, but how you say it. It's probably not gonna work, darn it. All right, well, it's funny if you want to watch it on your own. Basically, it's a skit from Saturday Night Live with Megan Thee Stallion. The two ladies have an entire conversation only saying the word girl, but it's all through inflection and body language that you can figure out like what they're actually saying. It's fantastic. I'm sorry, I can't show it to you. I'm gonna mess with, I do have other short clips. I hope they work. We'll find out when we get there. If not, that's okay. We'll get over it. I'll get over it. So looking at language, thought, and culture, Noam Chomsky has this concept of universal grammar, where basically he thinks that all languages kind of have a similar enough structure that we can combine them. And he brings up pidgin languages, pidgin with a D rather than the bird that's just without a D. Pidgin languages and Creole, Hawaii. Hawaii has a pidgin language that even if you don't speak it, if you speak English, you can usually follow along okay because it has enough English words and grammatical rules that I can follow along. Maybe every third word I'm going to go, wait, what was that? Because it's a combination of indigenous languages along with English. Basically, Creole is another one down in like New Orleans, Louisiana. That place, I know the history a little bit more. And basically what you had happen is during the Atlantic slave trade, you had indigenous people speaking their language in the area. You had French speaking French. You had English speaking English. And then you had a whole bunch of people from West Africa, all speaking different languages. And they were all put into the same area and had to figure out how to communicate. It would take too long for everybody to learn every single language. So instead, you start to find similarities. There's probably more similarities within the West African languages. And then they started to incorporate some French and some English and some of the indigenous language. So it sometimes just to like practice, because I do know some French, I'll look up on YouTube, Cajun French. Oh, that is hard because it's not just French. It's French mixed with some West African languages, mixed with some indigenous language. And it's a little harder to follow than Hawaiian Pidgin, but they're fascinating combinations of languages. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is named after the two gentlemen on the top, Edward Sapir and Benjamin Lee Whorf. It is the theory that different languages produce different patterns of thought. It's also referred to as linguistic relativity. Basically, it's the idea that our language shapes how we view the world. And a great example is gendered language. And I don't mean gendered pronouns for people. Not all, but many languages have them. Palognan in Burma does not. So they kind of use the singular they, them for everybody, which can get confusing if that's not what you're used to. I just said I studied French a little bit, and that is a Romance language. It includes Spanish, Italian, and French, all coming from Latin. They gender objects, and technically, it's not the object that has a gender, it's the word for it. So what slowed me down in learning French is trying to remember the gender of the word for table, the gender of the word for window, because for English speakers, we don't gender those. And it's something that you have to retrain your brain to try and remember when you're switching between languages. And that's probably the thing that messes me up the most. Like, that's going to be the really easy tell that I'm not a natural French speaker. One, my vocabulary is limited. And two, I'm going to mess up the gender of those words because I'm just not used to it. Sapir and Whorf hypothesized that no two languages are ever sufficiently similar to be considered as representing the same social reality. So they were saying languages are way too different. Noam Chomsky on the previous slide was saying languages are so similar, we can combine them. And realistically, I've seen both kind of proven. An example of linguistic relativity is with gendered languages. If you have a language that genders, say, the word bridge feminine, and then you ask people who are native speakers of that language to describe the bridge, they will use terms like pretty, bright, lovely, things that you might think are feminine. And when you, same thing, same bridge, ask people who speak a language where, I thought that was me, I was like, what's happening? Oh, look over here.
I'm very sorry, and I was like, thought it was you.
We are just all blaming each other. We're like, you did it. No, we're good.
And I felt it, I'm sorry.
You're good. So if you have people that speak a language where they gender bridge as masculine and you ask them about the same bridge, they'll describe it with words like strong, which we usually equate more masculine connotations to. The movie I have up there is just a shameless plug for a neat movie, but it's called Arrival, and I think it demonstrates the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis pretty well. Without spoiling it, I will say basically what happens in the movie is aliens come to Earth. They look like nothing we've ever seen before, and they speak a language that we've never heard. And their visual language is circular rather than like left to right or up and down, things like that. And so the government brings in some linguists, Amy Adams and more, and say, all right, figure out how to communicate with the aliens. And she slowly does, but without giving too much away, it starts to change her worldview. Because she's learning a completely different language with different rules, it starts to change how she views time and the world. Now it's fiction, obviously that didn't happen, but it is kind of an interesting concept. Looking at sociolinguistics, we see studies the changes in semantics and the cultural changes. Social position can be reflected in language. So I'll bring up an example with Lyubov and the fourth floor experiment in a few slides. Kotak brings up a study done on restaurant menus using just enough fake Spanish to look authentic. Now, I don't speak Spanish. I've picked up some random phrases and words over the years, but even I know that Diablo usually brings the idea of like super spicy food because Diablo is tied to like devil, hell, ooh, hellfire. So usually you would expect something called pasta Diablo to be blow your mouth off spicy. I'm sorry if I make you hungry, but I'm going to read the description. This is from a restaurant I used to work at that has now since closed, Carlos O'Kelly's. And if you can tell by the name O'Kelly's,
Irish.
it is super authentic. There was no Irish food. It was literally started by two white guys in Iowa who said, we want a name that'll get your attention for Tex-Mex. So we're going to take a Mexican first name and an Irish last name. And when I worked there, so many people asked me who Carlos O'Kelly's was. And I was like, that is not a real person. I is not a person. So the pasta Diablo, they still exist out in Iowa. Tender pieces of grilled fajita chicken, sauteed green peppers and onions, and rotini pasta mixed with our Diablo sauce. The Diablo sauce is a butter garlic sauce laced with the smoky flavor of chipotle peppers, topped with Monterey Jack cheese, tomatoes, chives, and sour cream, mildly spicy. So they're clearly just picking up a Spanish word to try to make it look more authentic. It was not authentic. Was it delicious? Yeah. Everything on that menu was covered in cheese. It was amazing, but not authentic. I think I couldn't find it. They probably changed the name. They used to have a burrito called Burro en Fuego. And I sat there and I thought, isn't burro a donkey? Does that mean it's a donkey on fire? That does not sound appetizing at all, but it was their spicy burrito. And I'm like, again, tell me it's two white guys in Iowa that don't speak an ounce of Spanish naming these dishes. So we see that a lot in restaurants. They'll try to make it as authentic as possible. But really they're just using a little bit of fake Spanish. And then, versus there's a taco place near my house, amazing authentic tacos. And across the street is Taco Bell. And it makes me laugh when I say, I kind of want Taco Bell. And someone says, oh, it's not authentic. And I'm like, I do not go to Taco Bell for the authenticity. I go for cheap tacos. I'm like, if I want authenticity, it's across the street and a different kind of delicious. Now, code switching, I've brought up before. It is also referred to as style shifting. It's the varying of one's speech in different social contexts. I'm realizing, unfortunately, if I'm not able to play the videos, we're probably going to end a few minutes early, which hopefully nobody's too mad about. But, we'll probably end a little early. Or at least I'm going to get through everything. The example on the slide, if you want to watch it on your own, I recommend it. This woman is a news anchor, and you know how news anchors have a very cadenced speech, very performative. And she basically is doing a live shot. As they're setting up the shot, she hasn't gone live yet. A car accident happens behind her. And she's talking to the cameraman in her normal speech of like, this is ridiculous. I can't believe this. And they immediately go, and you're live. And she's like, this is ridiculous. I can't believe tomorrow's city council meeting, and just like immediately switches. And I'm like, damn, that's a skill. I used code switching a lot when I worked in a call center. My neighbors in the call center would tease me because my customer service voice was very peppy, up an octave or two, just really passionate about insurance. I don't know who that is because it's not me. But I would be talking in my normal voice, and then I'd hear the beep that a phone call was coming through, and I'd just immediately go into that like, hi, this is Stephanie, how can I help you? And everyone around me would be laughing. I'm like, shut. I'm like, they don't need to know that's not my real voice. This one, if you want to watch, is Paris Hilton code switching. If you're old like me, Paris Hilton used to be the it girl. And she kind of perfected this like persona of Paris, where she has that very vocal fry, kind of high pitched, very nasally. That's hot. And she slips in and out of it at a congressional hearing, I believe. So it is.
Lots of people are talking about this video of Paris Hilton and how her voice changes. Watch it and then I'll talk about what's going on.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. I was in the car and I love your jacket. It sparkled from me.
Get a little fling here for today.
Yes. I wanted to find out who made it later. But I think the most important thing is they need access to therapy, counseling, and mentorship.
What you've just seen there is called code switching. It's a phrase in linguistics that's used to describe people who switch between more than one language in a sentence, or switch between more than one register in a sentence of the same language. Not only do we all do it, we often do it without even being conscious that we're doing it. When we're moving between formality and informality, to avoid bias, to soften or strengthen what it is we're trying to say. Paris Hilton has been giving testimony at a US congressional hearing about what's commonly referred to as the troubled teen industry. And she's been talking about her own traumatic experience of alleged abuse in it. Code switching meant she can go from rapport building with the congresswoman at the beginning of that clip, full switching to the matter at hand. But I wanted to bring in what she said about her own voice in an interview that she did, about how that higher voice of hers has been part of her media performance for years, to the point that she can't always control it, and that she often does it when she's shy.
I'm just like feeling a little bit more relaxed, that's where lower. But sometimes I have to tell myself, like, Paris, just talk in your normal voice.
The thing about code switching is that it's often triggered by context. Talking about fashion possibly triggered that register. That would be it. I'm a journalist that writes that language. Follow for more.
So an additional article I looked at is that's a fun word, linguocultural logical characteristics of sports slang in modern subculture, a very long academic wordy title to basically say, we looked at people using sports slang outside of sports. So telling somebody like, oh, I had a presentation today, it was a slam dunk. Things like that, where we use it a lot in everyday language. Corporate America loves so much. The article was by 4 different authors, but published in 2024, and discusses the use of sports slang in everyday conversations. Basically, we use slang in general as a carrier and translator of cultural information. Without knowledge of slang, humor becomes largely inaccessible. I could think of 100 examples from my youth that many of you would go, what are you talking about, Stephanie? And I'd have to be like, well, in 1997, it was hilarious. But a more recent example, we see it with meme language and trends, how quickly they become no longer relevant. So what, like a year and a half ago, I could have said something like, do you see how, this is really stupid, so feel free to laugh at me. Do you see how I study for the exam? Very mindful, very demure. And we all would have gone, oh, yeah, like, a year and a half later, done, it's done, no, it's not funny anymore. That happens very quickly, and I'm here to tell you, as a middle-aged woman, it only changes faster and faster as you age. I think I already said, I'm like, when it comes to my nieces and nephews who are like 10 and under, I don't know what 6, 7 means, and at this point, I just think it's not for me to know.
It'll be over.
It's for the kids. And yeah, in like 6 months, there will be something new. And I will probably also go, what? What are you saying? And then I'll bring up something from my youth. What was it? I got playfully reprimanded by a class once because we were watching a video online and I said I was gonna rewind. And they said, you don't rewind a video online. I'm like, back in my day, there were tapes. It was, I promise. There was. We had a rhyme. It was Be Kind, Rewind. Now, the use of sports slang is a way in which the speaker can express social relationships, teamwork, camaraderie. That's why corporate America loves sports slang. They're all about teamwork. So they want to say, you know, approach it like a team, approach it like a coach, things like that. They use things like who's the MVP, gloves off is another one. It also gives you a sense of belonging. If you are in a new group of people and you use a specific slang like sports slang, you're finding people with similar hobbies and interests. Because I'm going to be honest, while I know some of the sports slang, I'm kind of the person that, like, I said recently that I watched the Super Bowl, then I had to correct myself and say, no, I didn't. I was in the room and the Super Bowl was playing and I watched the concert. Yeah.
When you're not speaking Spanish, did you understand that?
I can understand the rhythm. I'm white enough, I don't know what to do with it, but I can understand it.
I like the words that you understand in it. Please.
With the music, with that rhythm, I'm like, I don't care what I'm saying. I think of like Opum Gangnam Style. I was dancing to that too. I don't speak Korean. I don't. Also, I laughed because I didn't realize how many cameos there would be. And at one moment I said, wow, that dancer really looks like Cardi B. And my friend is like, that's because it's Cardi B. I'm like, oh, okay, sorry. I just thought like, God, that's uncanny. She looks just like her. And then somebody else said Pedro Pascal was there. And I'm like, I missed him. I didn't see him.
Jessica
Alba was in there?
Yeah.
Now I need to go back and watch. Like,
Yeah.
how many people are in there?
You guys know that the wedding was real?
I learned that. That's cute. Aw,
But he's a player in the seat.
okay.
The teams. He was a player. Yeah.
That's cute. So it can give us that sense of belonging, even if it's not sports slang, saying different slangs. Think of like a movie quote or something, an obscure movie quote that you reference, and somebody in the new group laughs and goes, oh my God, I love that movie. You may not instantly be best friends, but you'll probably have that moment of like, we have the same sense of humor, I see, like something like that. So gender speech contrasts, it's similar to our views on color. Kotak brings up the concept that a lot of times men in our society don't recognize distinct color variations or as many as women. And Kotak brings up that it's predominantly cultural because we usually encourage girls in our culture to be a little more creative. They can take a little more liberties with like color matching, be into fashion, things like that. And so they may just be exposed to it. I would argue though, when it comes to color, color blindness is passed on the X chromosome. And as we know, most males in our species have an X and a Y, meaning they only get one X chromosome. So they're much more likely to be colorblind. I bring that up because my poor father is very, very colorblind. I am partially colorblind. It is very, very minute. It does not affect my day-to-day life, but it is rarer for women. So realistically, culturally, men are told, don't bother learning different color variations. But then biologically, some men genuinely may not be able to see very slight differences. That's where it manifests for me. I found out as an adult I was colorblind, and I wished I could go back in time and find all the people that I got in arguments with about the color of something and tell them they were probably right. I worked a job at Lowe's one summer in grad school, and I worked in the outdoor lawn and garden. And this woman came up to me and said, I'm interested in the patio set by the door. And I said, the gray one. And she said, the green one. And I said, you're probably right. I was like, thought it was great. Yeah. Language choice among genders can tell us more about the culture. In our society, using working class language is seen as more masculine. That is because blue collar work is dominated by men. So we view it as a more masculine field. If my volume will work, I have a funny video to show you. Now, I'm going to make sure it works first. The volume in this room. Who do I complain to? Yeah, it's not going to work. All right. So good news, bad news. I can't show you any of my videos. Good news for you is we're going to get out a few minutes early because that just took like 15 minutes off. So we'll play it by ear. I know, maybe it's because I was technically going to show you a digital movie on Amazon and they yell at me and tell me I'm not supposed to do that. And then I do it anyways. I don't know. Maybe Amazon is finally like, cut her volume. Now she can't show them. Looking at language and status position, we have honorifics, which are terms of respect used to honor people. So think of it like doctor, like on the GIF. You earn the title doctor. Well, allegedly, there are like Dr. Oz and Dr. Phil. I don't think they have, I don't really know what Dr. Oz's accreditations are. Dr. Phil, I don't think has a doctorate in real life. He just took that title. But for most people, you earn it either by doing a whole bunch of school to get a medical degree or doing a whole bunch of school to get a doctorate of like philosophy or something. And so you earn that title. That's why when I introduced myself, I said, two of the titles I have not earned are Doctor or Mrs. So don't need to use those for addressing me. Similarly, we use like Mr. and Mrs., things like that. Kin terms are terms of respect specifically for family members. So think of like, I unfortunately have lost all my grandparents now, but I think of my grandma, Shirley. I never really called her Shirley, called her grandma. Yeah.
I know it's random. That's what in some culture, females don't have to say they didn't earn the miss.
Mrs. Yeah,
It's the other way around.
good point. I like that. But yeah, I might call her Shirley as a joke, like playfully, but for the most part, I called her Grandma or Grams. That was my kin term. She, I would argue, earned that. She earned that. She popped out 4 kids, and they popped out kids. Yeah, she earned that. Funnily enough, it's the end of her life. We were sitting at the nursing home with her, and she was kind of going in and out of Alzheimer's. And in a moment of lucidity, she looked around at me, my sister, our mom, who is her daughter, and my aunt, who is her other daughter. And my grandma at 93 looks around the room and goes, I had something to do with everybody being here. And I was like, damn straight, Grandma, you did. Like, thank you. Thank you. If I've never said it, thank you. Like, I put up there another movie, Crazy Rich Asians, very cute movie. The protagonists travel back to Asia to visit his family, who's incredibly wealthy, and she is not. So that's your little like Romeo and Juliet moment. But when he gets there, he meets some people who he's technically not related to, but he calls like auntie and uncle. And we don't just see that in Asian cultures, we see that in Latin American cultures, we see that in many Black cultures, where they're not necessarily your aunt or uncle, you're not related to them, but they are of the generation of your parents, and you want to use a term of respect. So it can be confusing to somebody not from a culture like that, because it's gonna make it seem like they have like 50 uncles, and you're thinking like, and they're like, no, they're not all technically my uncle. And not quite the same, but I have like cousins that I'm not actually related to in any way. I just grew up with them. Their parents, I still, as an adult, call them my aunt and uncle, Aunt Mary and Uncle Bill. It feels weird to just call them Mary and Bill. I'm like, I know we're not technically related, but that feels too personal, too much to me. Within a society, language is often used as a ranking device. Or in other words, how you speak can denote your education level and your social status. I'm not saying that's fair, but we do kind of uphold that in our society. Labov is a famous linguist who did an experiment, I think it was in the 60s, in New York City, called the fourth floor experiment. And what he was trying to look at was geographical regions and socioeconomic status on whether or not people were pronouncing their R's, meaning rhotic. Basically what he did, so back in the 60s, there were tons of department stores in New York City. And still today, there are parts of New York City that are wealthier than others. So he went to different department stores in different neighborhoods. And this is old school. So in these department stores that were multi-level, they had elevator attendants. So instead of here, we get on an elevator, we know how to operate it and we do our thing. In the fancier department stores, you'll have an elevator attendant, a person who rides the elevator and just goes to every floor and will basically announce each floor. So you'll get to the third floor, and instead of checking a directory, he'll just announce like third floor, gardening supplies, and you'll be like, oh, that's me, and get off on your floor. So they'd announce each floor. So he went to areas in the wealthy, posh part of town, and there the elevator attendants were expected to be posher, fancier, better educated, even if they didn't have an education. It was expected that they could blend well. So they very somewhat harshly pronounce their R's. So when they get to the fourth floor, they would say fourth floor hardware. When he went into the less posh neighborhoods, not necessarily bad neighborhoods, but just not swanky, they'd be a bit more relaxed and they'd speak less eloquently. Sorry, you can tell I watched Drag Race. Elegantly. So in other words, they would drop their R's. So they would get to the fourth floor and, forgive my pronunciation, but they would say like both flow, leaving the R off. It doesn't mean they're stupid. It doesn't mean that they're speaking improper English. It's just that the R is not as important in their neck of the woods. And so realistically, if you swapped those elevator attendants, it would be confusing to everybody. The posh people would be aghast at somebody dropping their R's. And the less posh people would probably tease that elevator attendant and be like, whoa, swanky man, like, why are you pronouncing all your R's like that? So realistically, we get kind of weirded out when somebody isn't speaking our dialect. Proper language is a pathway to success. Think of, you've all been trained in English classes, how to write an essay. Even if you speak a different dialect at home, you're taught, well, that's well and good for speaking, but if you're going to write an essay, it's got to be like this. And that is training us for the professional world, you know, writing emails, things like that. Speaking of different dialects, and this is where I'm bummed I can't show you a video. Linked on this slide is, I think it's actually a Huffington Post article, but there is an 8-minute video I highly recommend watching. Maybe I'll do like an extra credit activity around it or something online. It is all about African American Vernacular English, or AAVE. Back in the 90s, that's what the video is about. They used to call it, and I'm so grateful we changed the name, they used to call it Ebonics. They were combining ebony, meaning black, and phonics, meaning like spoken language. So I understand the combination, but I'm grateful that we've changed the name. Many people who don't speak AAVE think of it as improper English. And I think the reason why is because we've been harped on for our entire lives to speak proper English and our grammatical rules. And so when we see something that looks like our English, but is slightly different, we react with like, oh, that's wrong. It's wrong. It's not right. It's not that it's incorrect. It's a completely different dialect. So for example, in standard American White English, you would say either you are tired or you're tired. In AAVE, it would be you tired. And realistically, if you hang out with enough people that speak AAV, it's, to me, I get frustrated with myself because I'm not trying to appropriate. It's really easy to pick up. And I will catch myself like, "Ooh, Stephanie, that is not your dialect, like tone it down." But if you hang out with people, you start to mirror them. So I think that's what's happening. It is very stigmatized. Back in the 90s, when I was going into high school, which would have been like 1997, 96, 97, Oakland public schools in California had a predominantly large population of Black students. And what they wanted to do was teach standard American English to their students from the understanding of AAVE, or Ebonics as they called it. Unfortunately, when that became national news, a lot of people were basically doing old school clickbait and saying, oh my God, white folks, they're going to force your white children to learn Ebonics and they're going to have to speak it. And that's the only language they can speak. And that's fear mongering. And a bunch of white people were very upset about this because they thought they're going to force my kids to learn this improper English. And so it went to like Supreme Court stuff, like it went high up in government. Unfortunately, it was a misunderstanding. Like I said, it wasn't that they were trying to teach white kids AAVE. They were understanding that most of their Black students already speak AAVE at home, can't talk. And so they need to approach teaching them standard white American English from that understanding. So basically, what they were trying to do is meet their students at their level, but it got completely misconstrued, and it was a whole international story. AAVE has similarities to Southern Standard American English and West African languages. So you can see that influence of basically slavery. Yeah,
Southern.
a lot of similarities.
It's Texas, about 30.
Mhm. Yeah, there are.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Is it wrong to put AAVE as a second language on next or anything? Like I've seen a video debate about this like days ago. I'm interested now that we're talking about it.
that's an interesting topic. What they're asking is if it's correct when you're like applying for a job to say like, oh, I also speak AAVE. I think legally it's not recognized as its own separate language, so you might get some pushback for that. But
I'm joking.
But no, but I mean, I'm an anthropologist, so for me, I'm gonna be like, yeah, I think that counts. I don't know if the hiring managers would think it counts, but I mean, yeah, it is a good skill to have. You can code switch back and forth. And realistically, I've had that happen when I worked in corporate America, where I would be speaking to someone who speaks English, but I can tell it's a slightly different dialect. My favorite was the like Central Texas. If you ever watched King of the Hill, we would call him the Boomhauer, where it is like rapid fire Southern, like daggone, you're like, What? I'm getting like every third word. I'm a Yankee. Slow down. Just give me time. But yeah, I wouldn't be mad at that on like an application. Now, historical linguistics, trying to see where we're at. Yeah, we're plugging along. Historical linguistics, we look at the changes of language over time. Subgroups are closely related languages, where they're very, very similar, and they have a lot of the same rules. Daughter languages are languages that share a common parent language, like Latin. So French, Spanish, Italian all come from Latin. Technically, Latin is what's known as a dead language. The reason why we say it's dead is there are no communities of people using it as their first line of communication. Now, obviously, doctors are going to know Latin. A lot of scientists are going to know Latin. We still use Latin in the medical field and science, but there's no communities out there using it to communicate. It's a very cute story. I don't know how correct it is because it's a story off the internet and anybody can post anything. But it was a story of a man who had studied Latin, was sitting at an international airport reading a book of Latin poetry. And a man came up to him who looked like a monk and in Latin asks, "Do you speak Latin?" And he's like, yeah, like nobody speaks Latin. Yes. And the monk basically in Latin explained he was from a small monastery in Poland, had traveled for something, basically only spoke Polish and Latin to do prayers, and was lost in the airport. So he saw a man reading Latin and was like, I can communicate with that guy. So I'm like, this is still a usable language, maybe not a full community. A proto-language is a language ancestral to several daughter languages. Latin would be a proto-language. The standing theory is that over 50,000 years ago, we produced the first proto-language in Africa. We don't get heavy into human evolution in this class, but the one thing I can confidently say is that we now know our species originated in East Africa. The part of northeastern Africa is actually called the cradle of life because of how many well-preserved specimens we found from like hundreds of thousands of years ago. And so we know that that's where we originated. So guarantee that's where we first started coming up with language. Unfortunately, that first language is lost to time. I would love to hear it. It probably sounds nothing like anything we have now.
Talking about like Egypt area?
Yeah, slightly south of Egypt, like, yeah.
Sounds something like that, Arrival movie.
It might. To bring up language loss, unfortunately, over the millennium, we've lost a few languages. One of the reasons is colonization. You had white Europeans going to far reaches of the world and forcing them to learn English, usually through violence. And so when we lose a language, we lose centuries of thinking about time, seasons, sea creatures, reindeer, edible flowers, mathematics, landscapes, myths, music, the unknown, and the everyday. We lose a lot. Think of if you do speak more than one language. If you've ever learned, I'm trying to think of a good example and I'm coming up blank. If you know of one, feel free to chime in. But if you've ever heard of a phrase in one language that's beautiful and poetic, and then you go, "Ooh, I want to translate that into English." And it's like, the sea is sometimes choppy. You're like, that was not beautiful at all, but in like Latin or in Spanish, it's this beautiful phrase that you're like, oh, so poetic. It just gets lost in translation. So if we lose an entire language, we're losing that. And a lot of times we're losing oral history, history that's not written down. Give or take, there's about 245 indigenous languages in the United States. This little map shows the language areas in North America. For anthropologists, when we first started to study Native American tribes, one of the things that was really hard to pinpoint is whose land was whose, because one, a lot of them moved around a lot with the seasons, and two, they had a different concept of property than we did. We like hard and fast property lines. Think of if you own property now and you want to put up a fence, you better make damn sure it's on your property line or your neighbor's gonna come knocking and be like, that's on my line. There, it was more like, oh yeah, this is the land the Sioux use, but also sometimes the Anishinaabe, and just kind of make it work. Not to say there were never disagreements, but for the most part, it was pretty much you knew who was where. So because we couldn't pinpoint like these are the people of Michigan or these are the people of California, we would focus on language groups. That's why there's quite a few different tribes and bands that fall under Anishinaabe. It is a language group. 65 of these languages are already extinct, meaning there are no living people who speak the language. 75 are near extinction, meaning there's only a few elders left who speak it. Navajo is one of the languages that's diminishing pretty quickly. And so, thankfully, there's been an initiative to dub movies, big movies in Navajo. I want to say they did the Avengers. Disney's been pretty good at it. So like if it's streaming on Disney, check the audio, like what language. You might be able to watch like Finding Nemo in Navajo if you want. It's pretty cool. Unseen, because I had to cut out all my videos were short. I'm sorry. Like I said, hopefully you're not mad at me, but you'll get a little time back. Use it to study for the exam or get started on that. I will continue on next week. Oh, the other little announcement that I did put on Blackboard is I'm probably going to be changing from doing group projects. I apologize. I've heard from quite a few people. It's been kind of a nightmare. So I'm sorry for making it messy. I'm looking at my options. I might just say we did enough group projects and make them individual projects to keep us going, to get you the points, but we might just say that's enough group projects for now. So stay tuned for that. I will let you know how that's gonna change, but otherwise you're free to go. Have a wonderful evening.
Well, I don't know if you got my message, but sorry about when I submitted.
That's okay.
I just get off work and I'm no shit, look at the dates and I'm just like, when it's sitting.
Understandable, understandable.
I'll sit. No, I submitted. And then I just keep going.